lasting joy will. For I, God, love justice. I hate robbery and wrongdoing. I will faithfully reward my people for their suffering and make an everlasting covenant with them. I am overwhelmed with joy in God. For God has dressed me with the clothing of salvation and draped me in a robe of righteousness. So it's so great to be the beauty of technology that I can join you all from Massachusetts. I relocated here in February. And it's great to see and hear see familiar faces and hear familiar voices. So thank you for allowing me in your community once again. So today we read from the book of Isaiah. So a little bit of background on what's going on here. We have people that have been exiled and they've been humiliated. They're feeling hopeless and they're thinking about their own future and what that actually means in a place that they do not call home. Isaiah notices this, and so he offers words of encouragement. And this chapter speaks of a restoration of people, returning of the people to their land. And this is a message of good news and a reassurance that the Spirit will be with them in the middle of chaos. There are instructions for people to bring news to the oppressed. And so we hear of prisoners being released, liberation to those in captivity, and an offering of comfort to those in mourning. Such a comforting and powerful message of freedom and liberation. Now, I don't know about you, but I kind of need it these days. Recently, we've been seeing evidence of some challenging times surrounding us. We have a water crisis in Mississippi. We have reproductive rights and queer rights being challenged. And don't get me started on monkeypox and COVID still running rampant. So there seems to be a running theme of some devastation. And so when we read Isaiah, we read a message about how the Spirit of God guides us through calamity and offers us liberation and grace. There's a sense of hope, and it's that hope that I try to at least every day hold on to. So before I continue, I want to acknowledge two lived experiences. I want to acknowledge that the Bible has some, in my opinion, some stories that are a little bit questionable to me about the love of God. And just like with any book I read, we take what speaks to us and about the love of God and we leave the rest. I also know that some people reading the Bible is a source of inspiration, and for others is a source of trauma. So I want to just lift those experiences up and validate those experiences. But aside from those questionable passages, the stories in the books of the Bible can offer comfort. And they tell stories of resilience and the hope of healing through community. There are voices of hope in this chapter, and Isaiah says that all that hope comes from guidance by the Spirit. And even though we can read text and decipher for ourselves the meaning of the text, it's the revelation of its spiritual meaning which offers that room for liberation to flourish. Now, everyone has a different understanding of the Spirit of God. My understanding of that Spirit rests partly in the Judeo-Christian tradition and also within diverse spiritual spectrum of faith outside of that context, such as indigenous culture, paganism, a little Buddhist, and even humanist. And at times when I want to personify God, I picture them as a gender-neutral spirit which has the source of love and that possesses qualities that would be defined in our social context as motherly, but I want to acknowledge that any of these traits can be found in any gender. This is a God for me that holds me and nurtures me. They comfort me when I'm in my dark places. They give me wisdom when I need it. So here in Isaiah, we see that nurturing Spirit of God transforming desolate cities into bountiful villages. It says, but you shall be called priests of God, for I, God, love justice. For I, God, love justice. That is so powerful. Because here the people of God have been disgraced by being exiled, and they're promised a double portion in their land. But I wonder, what do we do with ourselves today when we see devastation around us and we feel sort of an absence of that spirit of love? Well, I try to think on hanging on to hope. The Reverend Elizabeth Edmond states in one of her books that people who suffer under the weight of oppression have learned early on that our call is to risk unknown consequences in pursuit of what we're supposed to know beyond understanding, that God will bring life, even in scenarios that challenge us to our core. Now, I admit that's a hard one to swallow, to think that God will bring life even in situations that challenge us. I don't know about you, but when I'm in the midst of challenges, sometimes I forget that. I think about the challenges that we face. The challenge of finding out that you have an illness. The challenge that you've been told you will be let go from your job. The challenges that come from people telling us that we're worthless or no good or not enough. In the middle of those challenges, it may be hard to see where any good exists. But my friends, I want to believe, and I believe that there has to be some good in all of that. Because at the very least, it teaches us that we can reach out to one another for comfort, to reach out to a spirit that knows us and loves us, to reach deep within ourselves and find that healing. We've all been challenged, and some of us have found a way to overcome those challenges, even if it means years of going through a healing process. We may face challenges and often think that we won't find any refuge. I know that sometimes I get caught up in all the shadows, that I fail to see the light of love surrounding all of us. Those are the moments where I feel that I need to open myself to love, to be ready for love. From the gospel of one of my favorite singers, India Ari, she says, I am ready for love, here with an offering of my voice, my eyes, my soul, and my mind. You know, some of the tough days, I admit I'm not ready for that, and that's okay. Sometimes what I am ready for is to scream at the tops of my lungs, and that's okay. We were never meant to be always perfect and walking around all joyful all the time, because we were human beings. We are human beings with emotions. And I like to think that all of our emotions are blessed. I also like to think that it doesn't matter if we are ready for love. Love is already surrounding us, and it's ready for us. We are all victorious and can find victory through challenges by love's penetrable force. And we are justified by grace through love. Now, grace. Grace can be a complex term for some of us. The very core of the gospel speaks of the grace of God. Author John Stott says that grace is love that cares and stoops and rescues. It reminds me of a time when I was a little rambunctious kid. I was always playing around in front of the building. It's one of the things I miss about New York, where you can sit in the stoop of a building and enjoy people watching. And so I was hyper, and I was always jumping around. And this one time I kept jumping from the stoop onto the ground. And my mother would tell me, Robert, stop doing that because you're going to get hurt. And of course, I didn't listen. Well, this one time when I jumped, I tripped and I fell and I banged my chin on the cement. My mom saw it. I grabbed my chin and I was silent. I guess I was thinking, oh no, she's right, but I cannot let her know that she was right. So I acted like a superhero and just grabbed my chin, my eyes wide open. And there we were, just staring at each other, playing a painful game of who's going to blink first. And after a moment of silence, with tears burning my eyes, she bent down with caring eyes and said, come on. With that invitation, I let my entire lifetime supply of tears flow. She held me and consoled me. For me, that is what grace looks like. When we do things that we probably know well enough that we shouldn't be doing, or if we actually go for something and risk and end up getting hurt by it, grace cares, stoops down, and rescues. And the good thing about grace is that it's given to all of us free of charge. Living into the mystery of grace requires us to encounter it as a real gift. Grace isn't earned, grace is continuous, and it doesn't cease to do its work in our lives. It's that grace that transcends all matters of hopelessness and gives birth to hope. The Reverend Patrick Chang says that love is a manifestation of God's amazing grace precisely because it cannot be planned or earned. Love is not just a matter of works, but rather grace. We have permission to open ourselves up to that grace that gives us hope, not only to others, but to ourselves and to one another in community. Ellison writes that hope is not derived in isolation. And so we must offer that to ourselves and offer it to each other, the peace of knowing that we can reach out to help to overcome obstacles. You know, when we cannot resolve our crises solely on our own inner resources, we can reach out to what they say as the community of reliable others who can generate hope. Because hope is born out of a collaborative interchange, not in isolation. Having a spiritual connection to others, it shouldn't be even limited by the borders of our lands, but it should be expanded by the love in our hearts. I just recently read about an event that's been happening for the past weeks, I should say. And it's about this giant puppet called Little Amal. And it was created by a South African-based company. And this puppet, this giant puppet that has so many people controlling it, has been traveling it started in Turkey. And this puppet is a representation of this young Syrian refugee child who is in search of their mother that never returned from searching for food. This puppet is part of an art initiative called The Walk. And it's traveling around the world and it embodies displaced children today and is a symbol of international human rights. Funny enough, Amal is Arabic for hope. And little Amal was recently, this past weekend, I think it was yesterday, in St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. And the fascinating thing is that this puppet, this initiative, this unification of community was created by that community of reliable others to send a message of hope for those who needed to flee persecution for a new life. Isaiah teaches us about a resurrection of hope. There is this hope that grace gives us for the purposes of healing. It acts like a witness of God's promise, never to leave us regardless of the circumstances. Hope is seen in the communities that have gathered to fight for reproductive rights and for states to put into immediate action legislation that would secure those rights in the middle of chaos. Hope is seen in communities who have raised funds to get water to Mississippi. Hope is seen every day when some of us decide to get out of bed in the morning, when everything inside of us screams, stay in. And hope is seen in the caregivers that sit with those who cannot get out of bed, so that they are not alone and so that they can feel and be seen. Hope is love, and love is justice. For I, God, love justice. The early disciples lived within grace, and it was a hope that was charged with the responsibility of spreading that good news. Edmund says that this is love. In John, we see that Jesus tells the disciples, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, for you have love for one another. And when we take risks, are we doing that? Are we true disciples of a message of love? Do we not take risks of loving one another for fear of rejection? Heck yeah, we do. What offers us comfort in taking risks to love is the promise that God will never leave us, and that even when we are rejected, God still is in the business of working for our own good. What we read in Isaiah today is a story of hope that we must all start to tell one another. This is what the Trevor Project does when it says it gets better. We must not forget the story of hope that the Sylvia Riveras and the Marsha P. Johnsons and all the other civil rights activists of our world fought to deliver. Hope, grace. These and many stories offer that hope that we desperately need to hang on to. So, my friends, as I close, I want to offer some words from a good friend of mine, Dr. Glenn Siepert, who writes in his blog, The What If Project. He says that no matter how massive life feels and no matter how confused and out of touch we feel with the divine is right next to us and right inside of us. That the divine enters us through our inhale and invades the world around us through our exhale. That, like Jesus said, I and God are one. That we are so connected to God and so close to God and so inseparable from God that we are literally one with God. So, my friends, may we try and understand each other the way God understands us. May we try to see God ourselves as God sees us. May we remember that we are all promised grace through love and hope. May we be guided by that Spirit and become priests of love. The Spirit of God is upon and within us. To this I say amen. Amen.
Amen. Lovely. Thank you so much, Reverend Arnáu.